Hey, won't you join me in drawing a skull? We're going to begin with a square piece of paper, and I want you to find the middle of the paper by tapping it with your finger. And then I slid my finger down just a tiny bit before putting a dot there. If it's easier to just start in the middle of the paper, that's perfectly fine too. This is where we will begin the nose of our skull. From that little dot, I'm going to make a letter A, but without the horizontal line going through it. And then I'm going to turn this into an upside down heart by making one little curve and then another little curve. If it's easier, you could just rotate your paper around and draw a heart and then fill it in when you're finished. I'm drawing with a permanent marker. That's going to be important. Make sure your marker is permanent. Now we need to do the eye sockets, where the eyes will go. And I'm putting my finger there just to make sure that I create a space from one eye socket to another. So draw a short vertical line, then about a finger space apart, draw another short vertical line about the same size. Next step, you're going to make a curve right there under that line, and then one going in the opposite direction on the other side. If I'm going too fast, just hit pause and you'll be able to catch up. I'm making a curve on one side and then a curve on the other side before closing that shape, just like that. An eye socket is very large on a skull. So once you have that drawn, you can take a moment to pause and you can color it in with your permanent marker. Now that that's complete, I'm ready to move on to the next parts of the skull. So I'm going to draw a line on one side. Notice it's curved a little bit and one on the other side. So far, my drawing is perfectly symmetrical, the same on both sides. Decide where you want the top of the skull to be, and it should be up pretty high. Put a dot there, and then I encourage you to practice this part with your finger quite a bit because it's a big line. You're making a big curve that stretches from that top dot all the way down to close to the bottom of those curved lines on the side. Right underneath that heart shape, I'm drawing a horizontal line. And now this is where it's going to get kind of funny looking. I'm drawing some short vertical lines going down, so it looks a little bit like SpongeBob. I mean, without the tooth gap. I'm going to add a couple of more teeth on the side, and it's still looking pretty funny to me. Now I'm going to draw a couple of lines that go up and then two curves that come down from that side and meet that line. Again, if I'm going too fast, you can rewind or press pause. Now I'm drawing one line on one side and one on the other because, again, it's symmetrical, the same on both sides. Now I'm working on those bottom teeth just with a horizontal line and then short vertical lines. A little chinny chin chin action for my skull, and we're almost there. I'm just creating the curves for the chin. Why don't we try it? Oh, I almost forgot. A little bit of an eyebrow bone right there. Now that I know how to draw a basic skull, I'm going to do the same process again. So I'm starting with a dot in the middle, a capital A, two curves at the bottom for a heart, and then color that in. I'm just going through these steps one more time in case you need a little refresher or if you want to do something a little bit different like what I'm about to do. Again, I'm using my index finger so that I have a space between those two short vertical lines. And then I'm going to draw the eye sockets with a curved line there, one on the other side. And don't forget the two curves on the side, but it looks like I decided to go to the top. Nice going. So I'm going to draw two at the top, and then we're going to draw those two on the side. Now, if you want, once that shape is filled in, before you color it, let's draw some large circles for your eyeballs. So I'm going to draw one here. They could be looking in different directions. They could be looking the same way. The sillier, the better. And then don't forget to draw the iris. That's the colorful part of your eye. And then the little dot in the middle, which is your pupil, as I'm sure you know. And if you want to make the iris have those lines that look like the spokes of a wheel, that might add even more detail, making it more interesting to look at. And now you can color around that part. Now the eyes look extra spooky, I think. Now we can go back to the other steps by drawing those 2 lines on the side. And now we can work on the teeth. So I'm going to draw that little line right there, draw the short little lines for the funny teeth. I mean, now you could even knock out some of the teeth. You could make some of the teeth a little bit wonky. You could give it braces. The possibilities are endless. So make sure you have fun with it, especially now that you've got the hang of it. Put that little dot at the top. I like to put now a little guide dot right there, that little polka dot on that curved line. I'm going to have those 2 lines or those 2 dots come together. And now I can work on the cheekbone, which curves out quite a bit, before making the lines that come up from the teeth and then connect it right there. If it gets a little bit exaggerated or kind of too curved for your taste, that's the whole point. You want these skulls to look a little bit funny, spooky, or silly. You can even give it eyebrows instead of just the eyebrow bone. Now I'm going to work on those lines coming down from the bottom. It's almost time to add those bottom teeth with a couple of lines going down, some vertical lines, and then some short vertical lines for those teeth before drawing a line to kind of bring it all together. Add my chin, and then a couple of lines on the side for the jaw. And if you want to add some more spooky details, maybe some little cracked lines to the top of the skull, some cobwebs, anything your cute little spooky heart desires. Once that's complete, we are ready to add paint. I was inspired by the artist Damien Hirst, whose artwork you're going to see there on the screen, who created that skull painting. Let's do something a little bit similar. Notice I folded my paper in half, and then along the crease, I'm putting little blobs of paint. Blobs of paint in a variety of color. Instead of cleaning my brush each time, I just have about 4 brushes, each with a different color. Notice I'm kind of rotating my brush around to create a blob of paint. I want it to be thick because what I'm going to do now with the scraper is press it onto the paint and slide it down the face of the skull. Now my scraper, which you're going to see in just a second, is holding quite a bit of the paint. Do you see it all there? So I don't even have to add more paint. But what I do need to do is tilt or angle the scraper down a little bit so some of that paint is grabbed by the paper. And now my masterpiece is complete. But since I've made multiple drawings, I'm going to show you a couple of other tricks that you can do with this process. But I always fold the paper in half first, and this is the same process. I'm just making sure to add thick clumps of paint right there on that crease in a variety of colors, using a different paintbrush for each color, making sure to keep the paint nice and thick. This is a repeat of the first process. So just to review in case you missed it, and now I'm going to take my scraper and then slide it down the same way that I did just a moment ago. Let's see how this one turns out. Again, I'm using my scraper and I'm sliding it down. And I only had to scrape it one time because my scraper held on to all those different kinds of colors. Now, one thing I noticed about the artist Damien Hirst's work was that half of his skull looked very realistic, and then the other half was bright and colorful. Thinking about that, I decided to just outline the outside of the skull with paint. Again, using thick blobs of paint that I'm lifting up with my brush and making sure to use a variety of colors. Then along the crease, I decided to use just silver paint because I'm hoping that that's the part that will be filled in for the skull. Let's see if it works. And it did. So I have my skull filled in with silver and then the background of the skull filled in with color. Now, if you're worried about some of those colors smearing, then what you could do is clean your scraper in between each swipe. You'll notice that I've got a little bit of orange and yellow on the skull's face. That's because I didn't clean my scraper between each swipe. It doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, then make sure to clean it before you go ahead and swipe it. Let's check this side out. Pretty cool. So now that you know this process of how to draw a skull and how to add color, much like the artist Damien Hirst, who was our inspiration, you could make a ton of these bright and colorful skulls, as many as your cute little heart desires. Most of all, I hope that you had fun. Thanks, guys, for joining me on learning how to draw a skull and paint scraping. Toodles!